Good morning. It's Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. We're here for the Franklin County Commissioners meeting. I will now call the meeting to order and ask that you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adoption of current agenda. Any additions or corrections?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Under regular business, the items are all there, but we need to split that into two different ordinances. Ordinance 05-2024, and the second one is Ordinance 06-2024. The first one is under Section 1512 of the Building Code, and the second one is under 8.40 of the Fire Code.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Approval of minutes. Any additions or corrections?
No corrections here.
None here.
All right. Approval of warrant registers weekly and payroll rosters.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the amount of $1,307,329. And note that it has been signed by two members of the Auditor's Office and our Administrator.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve fund expenditures in the amount of $260,817.77. And again, it has been signed by two members of the Auditor's Office and reviewed by our Administrator.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion
Mr.
passes.
Chairman, I have a third fund expenditures for UMPWA, which is our P cards, in the amount of, I move to approve the amount of $11,528.62. And again, reviewed by two members of the Auditor's Office and signed by our Administrator.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, public comment. Is there anyone in the room for public comment? If so, please come forward, state your name, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle
morning.
Andrews, Pasco, Washington. I did like to hear reviewed by two auditors and the county administrator. And once again, on behalf of the people, advocate for a county administrator position to be filled so that these things can be reviewed, because that's who it all comes to. And that's in part why we've been working so hard on a budget, getting things together. Let's keep things in unity and conformity on behalf of the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. Mike Miller, Citizens for the Prop 1 ballot for the communication sales tax. I actually have been thinking about this last week and my visit last week, and I think I want to apologize a little bit. I want to apologize to the first responders for getting distracted on the issue of signs and lack of support from you guys. Okay? I think I owe it to them. I want this to be about the fact that we're trying to take care of our first responders as well as our citizens in this community. And the only way we can do that, one way, I guess, unless you guys have other alternatives, but we need to have the sales tax passed so it can generate the funding so that then we can create the infrastructure and the radios and ongoing support every year for the next 15, 20 years, whatever it is. So we have all of the other resolutions there. It's done at this point, so we have next week, we have the ballots finalized on the 5th and also Anyway, I think it's, the committee has worked as well as it could in the short time given, and we look forward to hearing a positive number of 50% plus one. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room for public comment? Any callers on the phone? No? All right. Moving on to the approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 5 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Regular business, ordinance 05-2024, adoption of ordinances to update Franklin County Chapter 15.1 Building Code, presented by Nicole Stickley, Senior Planning Manager. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to ask you this morning to respectfully pass those two ordinances that we've prepared for you. As you mentioned, one is for the building code update, the other is for fire code. Now, the codes are actually changed statewide by the State Building Council, and they have the authority to do that. So that has actually already occurred. It happened back in March of 2024, if I'm correct. However, you can set out your own ways to administer that, and you can promulgate your own requirements in terms of like when permits expire, things like that. And so what we've done is we have prepared two ordinances for you to, one, memorialize what's happened statewide by the State Building Code in adopting the new set of codes for buildings, and then also update the local administrative components to that. And what you saw 2 weeks ago, I think it was a ordinance that had been prepared for a previous ordinance, but of course there's been changes in the meantime. So this one is a clean copy that shows everything that is currently in effect, including previous repealed language is not, wrapped back in, and so you can move forward. And then this has been formatted so that it'll make sense to the codifier once it gets there. The ultimate goal is to make sure that the codes are correct online. That's one of the important things here. So we need to make sure that people can easily see with transparency what is the adopted code in Franklin County and how are these permits processed. So we've endeavored to make sure that it's very clear for that, and we would want to expedite getting this over to the codifier so it can be put up online. So again, respectfully ask that you pass these two ordinances, one being for the fire code update and the other one being for the building code update. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of ordinance 05-2024, amending code 15.12 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of ordinance number 06-2024, amending code 8.40, the fire code as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Commissioner Administrator updates.
You're moving so fast for me this morning. I have several things. The first item is there are 3 guests in the audience. Yes, they are, who are clerks of the boards for several other counties, and they kind of are down there. They are Teresa's colleagues, and they are just down kind of observing different county meetings, etc. So Annabelle Torres from Chelan County is here, wave, and Barb Vasquez, who is 20 years the clerk of the board in Grant County. So a long time, not the longest serving clerk of the board, actually. I think that's in Kittitas County, right? Yeah, Julie. And then Carly Bailey from Douglas County. So welcome to them.
Good morning,
Thanks
welcome.
there. You're seeing a short meeting. Stick around for the budget fund. So So the other item, and I'll be having Teresa print out a letter for your signature, and that is the letter for comments on the amendments to the standards for indigent defense. So no significant changes to the first draft that you saw. Very important for us to comment on behalf of, just Franklin County in particular. There'll be other comments from other counties as well, but we certainly are expressing our concern about the fragility of the system and the court system as a whole, and if you put one out of sync with the rest, that it really could be difficult for us to not only find attorneys, but then all of the other impacts that has within the rest of the system. So really asking them to take a broader look at that. I've spent most of my time the last week and the start of this week on the county budget. And so Tim will be in here later and we'll be kind of briefing you about recapping of what we heard, recapping some of the ideas that we've been assembling to try and close that from both the revenue and expenditure perspective, the gap. We are finalizing the RFP for the recruitment for a new county administrator for Franklin County. I'm meeting this afternoon with Adam Lincoln, who is the city manager here in Pasco. A really important relationship with the city, and we've got a number of items to really talk about. It's one of the perhaps relationships I haven't been active enough with. I've been doing a lot with Benton County, but I think the Pasco-Franklin County relationship is certainly one that's very important. So I'll be meeting with him to talk about a number of items of interest to both of us as well. So I think those are the big ones I just wanted to cover. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on in your departments, working with the independent elected officials on a few things, but just wanted to give you a quick update on those items.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Baumann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Eric, for the diligence that you have been having on our behalf, especially with the city of Pasco. That is certainly important, and thank you for that. Budget workshops, as with everybody else, Benton County Emergency Services Executive Board meeting, and one of the topics there was just the financial responsibilities that what's known as the Big Five will have in the work that is happening, and they're working on a draft that will come back to us as far as what the accountability for the finances will look like in the future. That's something that has just been getting worked on, and so look forward to seeing that draft. Had a CCOM task force meeting, and what that is in a nutshell is evaluating the CCOM becoming an independent organization, and our meeting specifically centered around what the governance structure for that organization, should it become a standalone organization, what that governance structure looks like. And really appreciate that meeting. It was several hours long and really felt like we made some significant headway on that. I hosted a regional emergency communications meeting with our legislators, and really appreciate almost every one of our legislators or their representative was there, and we did have a couple of remote, but really appreciate them coming forward and listening to some of the challenges that we have in our region with emergency communications and some of the other things surrounding CCOM and the challenges that we are facing there. And it is not unusual around the state for some of the challenges that we are facing. We talked about our 800 megahertz expansion project that is underway now, the microwave system project that's underway, the CCOM independence. We just had a really robust discussion surrounding that, and simply put, me hosting that meeting was with hat in hand. We need assistance. There was no specific ask, but at some point we will need their assistance. So thankful that they were willing to come and meet with us over there at the CCOM and Benton County Emergency Management facility. Shoreline Reconveyance Working Group, working on the draft cultural easement language. Appreciate everybody that's been involved with that. Then on Monday, I have a regularly scheduled meeting with Tim from the auditor's office about the county budget. Just really digging in, appreciate his diligence in helping me learn and understand that well. City council meeting on Monday, and then yesterday spent the whole day up in Moses Lake at the Columbia Basin Development League. Their large annual meeting. This is their 60th anniversary, and I know that you are familiar with that, but I think it's a very important organization and very important to us and the future of Franklin County and the completion of the Columbia Basin project, with there being about 300,000 acres that is able to to be finished. Just think it's really important that we work diligently on that. And Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Didier.
Yeah, last week. By now, everybody knows last week we went through the budget. Pretty tough decisions to be made here. Yesterday, Ben Franklin Workforce Development, the executive and the board meeting, we talked about the closure of the Lamb Weston plant, and they went up and did a job form up there. Lamb Weston told the employees to go apply at all the other plants, but when they're running to efficiency, there's no jobs to be had. There might be one or two to pluck, but this is having a domino effect on our community because potato growers now talk to one in the community that since that plant closed, they're not receiving potatoes anymore, and he's hauled 40 10-wheelers down to Bonina, which is a cattle feeding operation, and just dumped them on the ground. All he got out of them was the hauling costs. This is really going backwards fast in our community, this farming industry. Talked to an apple grower that going to a packing shed, and it's costing him $63 a bin just to pack the potatoes, or pack the apples, which is, he's losing money on every bin that they pack. That's why you're going to see a lot of orchards out there where the apples are going to hit the ground. They're not even wasting the money to pick them because they're going to have to pay money to have them packed. They're going backwards. And this is not just for them. The hay is down to 120 a ton now. It's having an adverse effect on our community, and that closure of Lamb Weston is having a domino effect because people are now starting to lay off farm workers. Everything's got to be downsized. It's going to have a very detrimental effect on our community. And then I talked to a packer that said that, no, it's worse than 63. It's $150 a bin that these apple growers are going to have to pay to have their apples packed. So you're not going to see them picked. And that means all the people that are here to pick apples, they don't have a job. It's going to have an adverse effect on our community. And then we always have the weed board come before the commissioners, but we've never had the mosquito board come before us for their budget. I was just curious as to, and Eric, I can't put this on you, but why doesn't the mosquito board come before us and present their budget and what they're spending? Because this is a tax allegation on land for the mosquito board.
I'll have to take a look. I don't know if there's a statutory requirement for them to do that like there is for the weed board.
Yes.
But I don't know if there's a statutory requirement for the mosquito board to do so.
For my 6 years, I've never seen them before the board.
There's probably not a statutory requirement, but I'll take a look.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just curious because we got to look at everything here as far as our budget. And then the last thing is, I just went and checked out our voting. Currently, we're at 28.6 of turnout in Franklin County. That's not very good. In 2020, at this same time, we are at 58.6. So we're lacking. We're half of what we were turnout for in 2020 compared to now. So if you haven't voted, vote. It's your God-given right. And it's how we keep this great republic alive and well. So please vote. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Last week, budget pretty much took the entire week. Next tomorrow is Halloween. Just to want to remind everybody to be careful driving out there with trick-or-treaters. So, moving on to public comment. Is there anyone in the room for public comment? If so, please come forward, state your name. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, just one more item. I do want to remind the board, you did get an invitation for the groundbreaking ceremony for the Columbia Valley Center for Recovery, Tuesday the 12th at 2 p.m. So definitely encourage your attendance if you can, but very important milestone for the community.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you. Hearing no one for public comment, is there a need for executive session today?
I'd like to have a executive session under cybersecurity, but I'm not sure what the number to that
It's
is.
RCW 4230-110-1A double I. And then we'll also need one under litigation. That'll be 1I triple I. So
For me, I need 5 minutes.
5 minutes. For me, maybe, we'll say 15.
20 total.
20 total, yeah. Attendees would be the board, the county administrator, legal, and, the clerk can stay. I don't see why not.
All right, thank you.
And for cybersecurity, I'd like to have our IS director
Oh,
here.
correct, yeah. So we'll do that one first,
All right.
and we'll kick Bo out.
So at this point, the time is 9:22. We'll go into executive session for approximately 20 minutes. Thank you. We've come out of executive session with no decisions being made. We are going to take a 10-minute, well, we're going to adjourn the meeting, and then we're going to take a 10-minute break before we start the workshop. So unless there's any further business for the good of the county, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. We will start the workshop at 9:56. Thank you.
they're hurting too. Yeah. And they wants to take on more. Talk about
Wednesday, October 30th, we are here for the Franklin County Budget Workshop. I will call the workshop to order at this time. Approval of workshop agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of the workshop agenda as it's been presented.
I'll second.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Presentation 2025 preliminary budget.
Mr. Chair, I'll start and say a few things. First, want to continue to extend my thanks to Tim Anderson with the Auditor's Office for all that he has been doing, and the departments and offices for answering questions when we've had them. We're on the path, hopefully, to get you a balanced budget for you to look at and for your consideration. Today is the next step in just starting to talk more about the things that we heard. With the Auditor's Office for all that he has been doing, and the departments and offices for answering questions when we've had them. We're on the path, hopefully, to get you a balanced budget for you to look at and for your consideration. Today is the next step in just starting to talk more about the things that we heard. With the Auditor's Office for all that he has been doing, and the departments and offices for answering questions when we've had them. We're on the path, hopefully, to get you a balanced budget for you to look at and for your consideration. Today is the next step in just starting to talk more about the things that we heard. With the Auditor's Office for all that he has been doing, and the departments and offices for answering questions when we've had them. We're on the path, hopefully, to get you a balanced budget for you to look at and for your consideration. Today is the next step in just starting to talk more about the things that we heard. With the Auditor's Office for all that he has been doing, and the departments and offices for answering questions when we've had them. We're on the path, hopefully, to get you a balanced budget for you to look at and for your consideration. Today is the next step in just starting to talk more about the things that we heard. With the Auditor's Office for all that he has been doing, and the departments and offices for answering questions when we've had them. We're on the path, hopefully, to
So it's 10:05. We're going to reconvene the meeting for the budget workshop. It's October 30th. Before we get started here, or while we get started, is there anyone in the room for public comment? If you have a public comment, it has to be addressed to only the items on the workshop agenda. Is there anyone in the room for public comment? Hearing none, we will move on to the workshop discussion, presentation of the 2025 preliminary budget by Tim Anderson. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm not sure if Eric was done before.
I think people heard enough. Just that, you know, today we're giving you some things to look at. We are asking for, I would say, very robust discussion, but we'll be looking for you starting to make decisions during our Wednesday workshop next Wednesday. So today is just, again, I think a continued providing some information to you, getting any thoughts that you have, any direction you have for things for us to continue to look at. We'll continue to do some work, some refinement. We've got some things we are still working on and that we'll continue to investigate and get more answers to on both the expenditure side and the revenue side as you move towards your decision-making for budget adoption. So Tim, go ahead.
Well, I want to start by extending my appreciation and thanks to Eric. I mean, I don't know if I've ever received quite the thanks as that repeated so many times in a short period of time. I mean, that was great.
That was the rest of the year, so I don't need to do it.
So up on the board and then in the packet that I handed out, there's kind of it's a summary of all the requests that were outstanding, and then Eric and I went through those and put yeses in the left-hand column of ones that look to be necessary, but ultimately anything that's a yes can be changed. It's still at the board's discretion, and then some of the bigger items are still left unmarked to be discussed as well. Just kind of a summary of where we're at. We started the workshop at right around 1.8 million deficit. Right now, currently in Gravity, we have a deficit of 1,309,231. And so how we got there is we had, I've updated salaries and benefits since the workshop. So anybody that left or new hires, I went through and updated that information. I also updated the vacancy estimates for all the departments. And so that's in there too. That brought expenditures down by about a couple $100,000. There was also right around 200,000, I believe it was, that was removed during the workshops from HR. And then one last thing is if the board recalls, last year there was the accumulated leave fund that was created, which was the idea was to be used to pay for people's leave out when they left employment. There was also an additional ability to potentially reduce large balances for current employees with mutual consent of both the county employees. That's not in any of the analysis that we've done for this year at this point. That would be a board decision if they wanted to go down that route, but it would be for when someone terminates their employment, then they would any payment would be paid out of this fund. And so how that fund gets funded is we had done some analysis in our office, in the auditor's office, where we looked at payouts for a 3.5-year period and just kind of averaged out how much those were on average each year, which we came to right around $326,000. And then from that, we took the number of FTEs in current expense and and then also factored in the cash balance that was in that fund to start. If you don't recall as well, it wasn't funded like this last year, and the reason why is because we had some tribal, I think it was a tribal grant fund that we had received that was right around 320,000, I believe. And so that could be used on anything other than lobbying, I believe. And so we had put that money as kind of the seed money for that fund. And so that's what was funding it last year when this fund was created. So there was, as of 8/1, there was 262,000 in there. And then we made some estimates, including the 326 estimate that we had based on the previous tab. And then we estimated to leave right around 100,000 in there just for if our estimates were too low, then it would give us a little bit of a buffer to cover any of that overage. And so that gives us a per FTE estimate of $1,000. And that I added into the budget as well based on the approval of the resolution last year. And so this $1,000, so instead of departments having spikes when people leave employment, you could have someone leave employment in past years where you're paying, $30,000 for a long-term employee that's been here a long time. Now it's just you're funding throughout the years for these people, paying $1,000 per FTE for each employee that you have each year. And so that as well is in the current numbers. So this first page here is just kind of a summary by department. I have it sorted from highest to lowest increases. So this is taking into, so we started at 1,309,000 in gravity. So then Eric and I went through each of the budgets, and which is on this tab right here, and added yeses to two things that looked like they're necessary, and then we also made some other revenue adjustments as well. And all of these are subject to board's discretion. But with that, so this summary gives just kind of a brief glimpse by department, all the changes that were made. There's various revenue changes. Part of those are we added in 60,000 as a transfer in from mental health to the public defense. That's on page 2. You'd see that on page 2 of your packet. There's 20,000, another transfer in from mental health into the prosecutor's office. That's on page 5. Both of those are for therapeutic court-related contracts or services. And then there's one of the bigger add-ins that we have in there right now is which is on page 6 of your packet, is a $997,000 transfer in from the commissary fund. So this was money that current expense had previously paid into this fund. There was a deficit each year in this fund, and so current expense has been funding that fund for a period of time. And then we recently received almost $1 million back from this vendor that I think should have been received through the years, that we wouldn't have had to pay those deficits, and that's added in as a revenue in the budget as well. There's also a property tax increase. We have it down as 120,000 and 1% property tax increase. The sales tax added $800,000. Just looking at the trending of that, we're looking to be well above the budget that we have for next year, and so that was increased, as well as investment interest and investment earnings, both by $100,000. So the commissary and then all those treasurer ones, the property tax, sales tax, investment earnings, those are all on page 6 of your packet. And then some of the, some other things, there's not, some of the bigger decision items left that aren't included is we almost have no capital included in the current, what's currently in front of you. There's capital items, they all start with 6.4 is what they're all starting with. And those, you can find those on pages 3, 4, 5, and 6. There's items in facilities, I believe. There's items in IS, sheriff, corrections. The only thing that we currently have funded in there is I think it was a lift in the coroner's office for $12,000, and then a $32,000 IS phone server. So both of those have yeses beside them, but none of the other capital currently have yeses on them. And there are some big ones out there. Sheriff vehicles. There's a lot of IS related items as well that these are big decision items for the board. And then there also may be, we had talked about during the workshops, there were several funds that haven't had any recent activity. And so there may be about $100,000 to $200,000 that we can transfer into current expense. I haven't had time to do the analysis on that. That's not included in this currently, but if we close out those funds, then there'll be some additional revenue from that. There's some minor personnel included that you can see on the S&B as salaries and benefits. In this column, well, the public defense isn't so minor. It's for a new OPD manager position, which would be offset by our previous OPD manager leaving, which was a contract position at $60,000. And so you have an increase in salaries and benefits and a decrease in the contract. And then there's some minor changes in civil service. I was bringing that into a matrix position. And then there's, in the commissioner's office, we have ads for one position going away and one position being added. The government affairs going away and the public records officer being added. A net $11,570 increase on that. But there are still decisions to be made on personnel, including in the clerk's office. There was some regrade restructurings. IS as well had some regrades restructurings. And then sheriff was requesting a new deputy, which there was also some non-personnel requests associated with that, including a vehicle. There's also not added in this. One thing I was thinking about after I met with Eric yesterday was there's still probably $100,000 to $200,000 that will need to be funded for the BCES, the microwave system / radios. That the majority of that we can fund from our E9, the Emergency Communications Fund, but we'll still have to come up with $100,000 to $200,000 likely from current expense. So, as mentioned, so right now we actually are showing currently with all of the ads that we have right here, all of the yeses, which include some major revenue increases. We had $800,000 sales tax, the $1 million in from commissary. And so with that, we're showing a surplus of $691,000. But with that being said, that's not factoring, as I mentioned, a lot of the capital requests. There's some personnel requests to still be decided. Anything that doesn't have a yes in that leftmost column is not currently included in that number. There are, for facilities, the capital, it's a no in that column for the 2 HVAC systems. I think those can be funded from our real estate excise tax fund, the 170 fund, similar to what we did last year for some projects that they had. And so it's a no in this, with ultimately if the board wishes to move forward, I think it can be funded from the real estate excise tax fund. And, so we're getting closer, it would, seem to balancing with all the stuff that we have before you right now. But I think the board should keep in mind that, even though we started with a $1.8 million deficit and you have, right now almost $700,000 surplus, I'd bear in mind that, we're not going to have $1 million transfer in from commissary each year. That's an anomaly that won't be happening again. And then, two, we've had good years recently with investment earnings. $2 million or so the last 2 or so years. And so this is something that we can't count on being that high in future years. And so, I would still argue that we're in a structural deficit. And so, we may be able to come up with these fixes for this year with commissary money and, some of the investment earnings that we have, and sales tax has been good as well. But ultimately, long term, I think there's some issues that the county sees. So I don't think we need to go line by line. There's, the board can see all the yeses that we have within their packet, which, any of those can be changed at the board's discretion. And I've kind of highlighted some of the stuff that's decision point, which, it's just all the stuff that's unmarked in the left-hand column. So there's a lot of stuff. I think there's still remaining $1.4 million of requests that are not accounted for in this, which would include a lot of capital. And so there still are a lot of requests out there. So even though we're surplus showing on the sheet right now, if you add in half of those requests, we're right at zero. So there are some big decision items left to make. And so I think what Eric and I are wanting is the board to kind of mull over this packet over the next week, and then give us some feedback as far as whether this is looking good for you, what capital requests we're looking to do, and any other changes that we want to make. Some of the personnel decisions, some of those. The personnel ones, long-term implications, because it's going to be funded each year if the board decides to move forward with that stuff. There's also some, the IS grants we don't currently have in there. There's some revenue and then related expense. And the reason why that's not included in there, even though they would generally offset, is, because when the grant ends, once again, if we're stipulated to continue on with those services, we may be able to stop the service at that point. But if we're not, it's going to be a continuing cost to the county as well. And so that's something the board needs to decide, as well as if that's something that we want to do, if we want to, because I think we might be covered for 2 or 3 years on some of those grants, but then after that, we'd be bearing that cost. And so it's a big decision point. Eric, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think Tim captured the main points. I think just wanted to reiterate is, yes, you might be able to utilize some revenue strategies to get to not having to perhaps even, take a road shift. You might be able to get yourself there. However, we're not making any inroads in what I'd call fixing your structural deficit. We bought you another year, which is good to say that you're doing the right thing. However, you're in the fact that you're not necessarily having to go out and ask for the voters for more revenue. But there are some things you can continue to give us guidance about, and that is, if you want to try and build a fund balance, then surplus is good. You can start to rebuild that. You might think about, even though we've said yes to certain requests, you might say we just are going to have more of a status quo budget from last year and kind of roll some folks back. And what's your philosophy behind that? How do you what do you think about that? Do you want to do it in more surgical and go in, or do you just want to have more of a philosophical statement about that? So there's different ways for you to be thinking about this. I think we'll be looking for a more specific direction next week. I want to remind you what this doesn't include. It doesn't include the cost of living adjustment as well. So COLA is a separate entity, which will be roughly, if it is about 3%, it will be about $660,000. So if you want to do a COLA, some of which are bargained, or some of which are bargaining, and some of which are for your non-bargaining group. So I think that's a big item for you to continue to think about as well. And, as you kind of go through this, I really do encourage you. I think this ultimately is, in my mind, these are your decisions. We have, in particularly, I would look at the revenue, those revenue estimates that Tim talked about, dealing with sales tax projection, investment interest, and both on interest and on earnings. Those total $1 million, and that's on page 6 of 9. So, think about that. Have conversation with your treasurer. Have conversation with Tim about, or myself about, why we're suggesting going higher. You have historically adjusted those figures from where the treasurer came in at, but take a look at your comfort level with those projections. This does also include that 1% property tax increase, which is $120,000. So that's taking that 1%. So remind you that gets spread out over the entire county for that. So just I think those are the big elements that, from a revenue perspective, really be thinking about. Those are the chunks, the big chunks that generate revenue to kind of help this offset some of the increases. So really encourage you to have a look at that. But then also thinking about is if you want to try and get more ahead of this, and so you're not just reacting again next year, do you want to be more proactive in fixing the structural deficit this year as well? So let me know tomorrow, not tomorrow, but next week when we're having these discussions, how that plays into your thinking.
One other item too that was something that we added to the sheet that wasn't directly from Gravity was the towards the top of your sheet, the non-barg benefit change. That was related to the health benefit change that the board approved by resolution a short while ago. And so that's an estimated number. We don't know. Open enrollment is still pending. And so, we just, somewhat of a shot in the dark as far as what that number will be. There's, if you remember, we had $2.1 million, I think, of total savings county-wide if everybody stayed on the same plan that they were getting. So there will be movement, and so that'll change that $2.1 million. But also this number is only for non-bargs as well. And so
Which
I think
page is
there's
that?
Right on the top
First page?
Second item
It's-
down on
yeah,
the first
second.
page.
Sorry, I was looking at the single sheet.
And so that, I believe there's right around 80 of the 260 or so FTE and current expense that are non-bargs. And so with that, it's just, I think that the math on that worked out to right around $650,000. I don't think there'll be a $650,000 saved because people will change plans likely. So that will diminish that sum. So the number we put in here was 400,000, but once open enrollment happens, we'll have a better idea of where we're going to land.
Couple of questions on page 6. The commissary transfer in 997. Does that include 24, or is that just the previous to 24?
It's all of it, I do believe.
And then down on, under the treasurers, what's the difference in investment interest and investment earnings?
They budget, you know, I'm not sure. I think one may be LGIP and another CDs or something. I'm not entirely positive. I defer to
I
the,
understand. I think I understand.
LGIP is the local government investment pool, which is run by the state. The treasurer also invests separately.
accountants and their acronyms.
I have a question on the property tax 1% increase of 120,000. I'd like you to explain that to the board one more time, but my question to that is, of that 1% increase, does any of that, the funds go to the state since it is property tax, or does that all stay within the county?
The 120 would stay within the county.
But the 1% increase would be more than 120, would it not?
No.
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 It all stays within the county.
Yeah. Yeah, that is your, if that is and I want to make sure what we say, we can collect 101, so we collect 1% more than what the county collected last year in property tax, plus new construction. So this is just that 1%. If you chose to take the 1% increase, which is spread out across the entire county because it's of the collection, then you can, in fact, it generates $120,000. Yep.
Okay.
Other questions?
Just a comment. I want to thank you, Eric, and I want to thank Tim. This is the best information I've ever gotten in the 6 years I've been here as far as where we stand, and good stuff. Just want to thank you both for all your hard work and the efforts you put into this.
So if Tim, you want to go back, I do really want, while there is that surplus of 691,000, I think, Tim, you indicated there are a lot of unfilled requests sitting out here still. And so that's kind of the homework assignment over the next week, is to think about utilizing this, both, of those unfilled requests, but you can't ignore the things that, the things that we have also kind of indicated yes to, that if those don't concur with what the board wants, or one of the board members wants to bring that up and ask questions, please don't hesitate to do that. There's clearly some increases that are a little bit out of our control as well. Insurance, is a big item that you'll see in particular throughout, particularly our liability insurance. Both general liability and property. So you're seeing some significant increases over the past years to this account. That has not changed as well. So while there are some things that you might look in the 2025 requests that are in operations, there's also some of those items that are just fixed that we're going to have to pay for. So encourage you to take a look at kind of all of those components in particular as well.
I guess one more question would be, in the matter of OPD, how assured are we of that budget at this point in time with the state and everything?
Well, Yeah, if you're asking, will the state adjust indigent defense standards, that we'll have to come back and revisit, because we do not project at this point in the 2025 budget any additional increases in caseload standards. When will the Supreme Court give us that portion of the answer, and what will the state legislature's reaction be during the 2025 legislature? Those will be really important questions for just not Franklin County, but 38 other counties that are going to struggle with that. And right now, you all contribute about 96% of the cost of public defense in Franklin County. That's true of most of the counties throughout the state. That is certainly unsustainable if we get significant caseload standard changes.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate all the work, and we've got our homework cut out for us to go through this, so I do very much appreciate. This has been the best budget review that I've gone through since I've been in office, so thank you. I really do appreciate your hard work. So.
Definitely the best one I've been through.
If I could, I was going to add one more thing, just for the board to, something to keep in mind is that we, talking about the structural, our budget, how we have a structural deficit and everything. One thing to keep in mind is that like right now, we have $7.8 million in as beginning fund balance, and we have $4.9 million in ending fund balance. This was talked about some during the workshops as well. So we have a $2,910,000 difference between revenue starting and ending. So we're budgeting as if we're going to end almost $3 million lower than what we start the year. Now that doesn't typically happen because revenues end up coming in, 105% of budget, and then we spend 97, 98% of our budget. But that's when revenues are coming in good, and this is part of my warning as far as like investment interest and stuff. That's one of those things that and sales tax that have really helped us to make it so that this has worked. But if we do have a downturn in some of those things that have benefited us a lot through the years, then we would hold true to what we're budgeting and be starting the following year $3 million less than what we began, and that ultimately leads to cash flow issues as well before taxes have come in. That can lead to where we're needing to borrow money from another fund within the county to be able to even pay payroll and stuff, because we just don't have the cash flow to even make it through the year.
Yeah, one of the techniques you may think about doing over a longer period of time is looking at a 10-year pattern of interest income, so that you potentially then just draw out kind of that average amount on an annual basis from kind of a pool of those resources, so you don't build a government based off of these great investment interest years, and only to find out as interest rates, as they slowly come back down, you've built this government with the understanding of this much interest income coming in. It's not a sustainable amount. So maybe if you average that out over a longer period of time and you only take that amount, there'll be years where you actually add to that, and there's be years that you don't. So you can potentially think about collecting that in a utilizing it in a different way as well. So that's something to be thinking about as well over the long term, so you don't get into the situation of years where, and that's been one of the growth in government actually over this past number of years, is interest income has been really good. Sales tax has been really good. we've yet to plateau. That's just been continually going too. So, your property tax is actually your most stable revenue source. While it may not grow with inflation, like be great, but it provides a really stable source and predictable source of revenue.
And I think that's great caution, because with the environment right now, it doesn't look like there's going to be too many purchases out there on these farms. And so the sales tax may be going down on us before we know it. And I think that we need to be cautious, and with the election coming up, the uncertainty, extremely cautious. So appreciate that. Thank you.
And one of the strategies could be too, if there is any surplus ever, is putting that in ending fund balance to have less of a gap between the two. If if at some point you have a $400,000 surplus, well, that can go in to essentially go into ending fund balance to close that gap. So instead of 2.9 million, we have a $2.5 million variance. I think the more we can get to where we bridge that, make it smaller, I think the better.
And if we get any funds excessive of that, we need to build up our emergency fund. It is lacking terribly.
Well, and I think that's one of the main thing the board needs to be thinking about as, we have this year and we, can, looks like we can probably get this year balanced and everything, but I think we really need to be looking at the future and figuring out, okay, once again, we're not likely we're not adding to reserves again this year. And so how are we going to get to where we are? If we have a structural deficit, how do we still manage to put money in reserves? Because we need to be planning for the future. And so I think that's something that the board needs to be thinking about as strategies of what we can do to get there.
Yeah, and to that end, one of the kind of the confines here is that the things that you do now will potentially, the decisions you make now will have an impact into 2025, into 2026. And so if you can, if there's the will of the board to bend that curve, you can start to bend that curve. The earlier you start to bend that curve, and even though you might have the resources to make that budget look, good on paper, that it may not be changing your trajectory of budget growth. So you may want to think about how do you, and that's on the expenditure side, how do you start to bend that curve? Mm-hmm.
This represents no road shift, correct?
Correct.
Right now.
Well, that'd be the first time in years.
It's, as Commissioner Didier said, I think it's important that we look carefully in case the winds shift. I know that this will be the largest new construction that we have ever done in Franklin County. $569 million in new construction. That's an extraordinary number, and it's an extraordinary growth curve over the last 5-8 years. Looking at that, and it's a blessing maybe in disguise, because it's good for this year, but what does it do down the road? Growth happens before you get the income to pay for the infrastructure that is used for that growth. And so it's exciting to see the growth, but we need to be careful with it.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments?
I think I'm good. Public comment.
All right, we will move on to public comment. Is there anyone in the room for public comment? that relates to the workshop agenda.
Michelle Andrews, I think that we've learned we have to stick with our budget. We cannot give raises outside of the budget cycle. It triggers all the unions. I think there's at least 4 that operate in this county. We can't do that. We can't incentivize. The taxpayers pay millions and millions of dollars more. Not that every worker that works in this building is not worth that. They absolutely are. And I'd have to say, Tim, you're a real gem. We're so thankful for you.
Thank you.
I also caution decisions until elections are done, because if certain election outcomes are such and our state legislature is configured in such a manner as that we have no input as conservatives, there will be a run on taxing like no other, including people who own very expensive homes and new growth. So we are in this together. We are working hard. We all care about our county. I wish there were a lot of people that could go out and help the farmers right now pick and save them a lot of money. This is sobering. So we will be thinking as well and bringing input as needed. But Franklin County used to have an overage, and I don't know if we're truly in a structural deficit or if we've kind of hurt ourselves. But we will move forward and support a very conservative budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room for public comment?
Update the commissioners with some numbers if I could. I'll be certifying today the assessed values for the county and the new construction. We've actually even increased it more, Commissioner. Last week we submitted to you that the new construction would be $510 million. It's now $573 million, which is the most ever for this county. So we will be certifying that. Now, a large chunk of that is in TIF areas, as your administrators explained to you. It's a pass-through. The county doesn't get that, throw it in their pockets. It's going to be a pass-through. However, it does change your highest lawful for next year. So your budget is going to increase. You're just not going to be able to get those funds until next year from that new construction increased in your highest lawful. So it's based on current levy rates. So at that new construction will be about $420,000 increase for next year's budget, plus the 1% if you do that. So between the two, plus next year's increase, which would be probably close to another 120, by next year, your highest lawful would increase over $600,000 towards budget. So it is a delay because the TIF goes as a pass-through, but I wanted to let you know that is at least something in the future. Now, if construction slows down, I caution you, as well as Tim had, your sales tax will slow down, because it's normally about 1/3 of your sales taxes in new construction fees, monies for supplies and so forth. So I just want to throw that out to you. Those are final numbers. They will be certified today.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. Yes,
it'd be okay
Commissioner
if I
Valen.
interacted with the assessor for a moment. Would you help us understand what would happen in this tax increment financing area should our property tax, or I'm sorry, our property values decrease, therefore increasing our levy rate, and what would be the consequence of those tax increment financing areas? I believe that the county would be on the hook for that difference
And it would shift to the taxpayers to make up that difference.
outside of that TIF area.
Correct. Outside of the TIF area, that shift would go to all the other taxing entities within that taxing district, and there are different ones, should everything reverse. Correct. The legislature was aware of that when they passed that law. It was brought to their attention, and we're living with it now. So fortunately, we're the fastest growing county in the state. We intend to still have positive growth. We've done preliminaries on the levy rate for the county's piece of it. And I don't have budgets for anywhere else. I'm just looking at the totality of what we could budget for the county. And our portion of the levy rate will decrease again, but not near the percentage that it decreased last year or the year before. Correct. But it still looks like a decrease in levy rate.
Thank you.
For it. Okay.
Anyone else for public comment? Any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this workshop is adjourned. Thank you.